Welcome to the 6 in my series of video articles on how to write short stories. In this series we're going to look at everything you'll need to start writing short stories yourself, ranging from plot structures, story models, different types of short stories, how to generate ideas, things like outlining or discovery writing, revision, etc. etc. In this article, in number 6, we're going to look at the revelation type of story, which comes from Damon Knight. If you haven't seen article 4, where I gave an overview of the 6 different story types that Damon Knight identified, then check that one out as well. If you don't know Damon Knight, or you're new to this series, he's a science fiction author, sadly passed away now. He wrote a book called Creating Short Fiction. In my opinion, and especially if you aspire to be a genre fiction writer, detective, mystery, horror, science fiction, fantasy, even romance, this is the best guide that I've come across to help you with the techniques and things that you need to write good short stories. So Creating Short Fiction by Damon Knight, pretty cheap, $6 or $7 to get the Kindle version on Amazon. So get that and read that. And let's dive into the overview of the revelation story. Now, in this article, we're going to look at the 4 core elements of the revelation story. Put my teeth back in. We're going to look at the key characteristics. We're going to look at when you should use this story type, and we're also going to look at some examples. I'm going to give you some short story examples and also some film examples. This is quite a popular story type, especially if you write kind of horrors, dark fantasy, detectives, those kind of genres, suspense, because the revelation at the end of the story is a big part of those genres. So let's look a little deeper at 4 core elements, but remember this is just an overview video. So the 4 core elements of the revelation story, it concerns the disclosure of hidden information. That information is gradually revealed through the story and through the story events. The ending usually provides a big revelation, and that can require the reader to really evaluate all of the previous events in the story. And there's a couple of film examples that are great examples of this that we'll come to in the 4th part of this video. And misdirection and hiding clues are part of the way that you trigger the surprise when you get to the ending and you suddenly get the big revelation that is the big twist in the story. Key characteristics of the story. It often builds conflict through the story with mystery and curiosity rather than necessarily conflict between characters. And in fact, you can use inter-character conflict as misdirection so that you're presenting plot events to the reader and just subtly distracting them from where the story is actually going. The story often surprises the reader at the end with an unexpected truth, and this kind of story often involves a twist ending. One of the reasons I really like it, not cross-referenced later in this video, but Jeffrey Deaver writes short stories with a twist. I think he's got 2 collections. One's called Twisted, one's called More Twisted, which are just stories with a twist. He's really good at these kind of stories. And he's got a couple of other collections, which I've not checked out, so I don't know if they're all twist ending or if there are other short story types that he's using in those. But those 2 books, Twisted and More Twisted, are great examples of the twist story. When you should use this story type. When the core idea for the story or the core conflict hinges, or the climax of the story revolves around the revelation of a surprising truth, hence the name of the story type, revelation. It's also good for stories exploring deception or hidden realities. So again, deception, hidden realities, they're staples of dark fantasy, thriller, detective, mysteries, so it makes those short stories prime to use this story type. Twist in the tail type stories, as I've already spoken about, naturally fall into this category. And if you want to challenge reader assumptions, so you set them up so they believe this, and then they believe A, B, C, and D, and then suddenly you hit them with something which is totally different, and it makes them go, wow, I totally didn't see that coming, and I misread these plot points. And there's a couple of examples coming up, film examples that will come up in the next couple of slides, which really, really will demonstrate this to you. And if you've seen both of these films, you'll be very aware of how they were set up, and how this story type, if you handle it correctly, can have a massive wallop at the end of the story. So let's look at some examples, some short story examples first. Classic, Edgar Allan Poe, The Cask of Amontillado, and the revelation is, why does the protagonist want to get who we don't know is an antagonist but is another character, why he wants to get that other character into the catacombs. The Necklace by Guy du Maupassant, let me get my French accent out correctly, is another revelation story. Quitters Inc. by Stephen King. I've spoken already in this series about Night Shift, the collection by Stephen King. One of the things in the very first video we talked about was reading. That video was about the Ray Bradbury method. Night Shift by Stephen King, his first collection of short stories. The two Jeffrey Deaver ones I mentioned earlier in this video. If you're at all interested in writing that kind of thing, those are great books to have. Roald Dahl's Tales of the Unexpected, there's numerous volumes. He writes very different tales with a twist, and they're very clever, and the best ones are really good, and I highly recommend those as well. The Small Assassin by Ray Bradbury is another revelation short story. Ray Bradbury, a master of short stories. Anyone who aspires to write any kind of short stories should get a collection of Ray Bradbury's classic short stories, because although he might be nominally a science fiction stroke fantasy writer, all his stories are peopled with interesting characters. And at the end of the day, stories are about people and characters. And the last short story, often cited as one of the top 20 short stories of the 20th century, The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. This one's worth detailed analysis of, and I will do a detailed analysis in this series at some stage. I mean, I plan to analyse 30 or 40 short stories over the next 6 to 12 months as part of what I'm doing. The Lottery will definitely be one of them, because the revelation is masterfully hidden. So, The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. Films. There's a lot of films that use this short story type. Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock was the director. I'm not sure if he wrote that or not, or whether it was another writer, but obviously the revelation is about Anthony Bates and what his character really is. The Usual Suspects. If you haven't seen The Usual Suspects and you're into crime, detective, thriller, that kind of genre, and even if you're not into those genres, you should go and rent this out, watch it, let it sit in your brain for 24 hours, and then watch it again and see how the revelation at the end is set up. Very, very clever film, really entertaining, brilliantly acted, great film. 7, the Brad Pitt Morgan Freeman story, film that's not as good as The Usual Suspects, but it's still an example of a revelation film. If you remember the box that was delivered to Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman when they'd collared the suspect, who was also, and I've forgotten the name of the actor, he was also the main actor in The Usual Suspects. Kevin Spacey, that was the name. So he was the villain in 7, and when Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman characters collared him, there was a box delivered, and what was in the box was the revelation. The Sixth Sense. This is The Usual Suspects and The Sixth Sense are two great examples of revelation stories, because both of the twists that the stories turn on at the end make total sense when you get to them. But if you've not seen either of those films and you don't know what those twists are, they're brilliantly telegraphed and set up and delivered. So they're great examples of how you can create a revelation story. And as I already mentioned, this this story type is perfect for horror, detective, mystery, dark horror, some fantasy, some science fiction, because of that revelation. So it's a really handy story type to know more about and have in your locker. As I say, this is just an overview video. There's much more detail in the writing vault on this story type as well, and you'll find more in Damon Knight's book, and he's got a great analysis of a Roald Dahl short story in there too. In the next episode, we're going to be looking in more detail at the third of Knight's 6 story types, and that's the decision story type. As with the last 2 videos, we'll look at the core elements, key characteristics, when to use this story type, and always there'll be some examples, hopefully some of which you'll be familiar with. So until that next episode, which will be on the decision story type, if you need to send me an email, ask me a question, you can comment on YouTube. This is a reasonably new YouTube channel. It's about a week old. As it gets busy, I imagine as I get more comments, it will make commenting on YouTube directly much harder. At the moment, I'm commenting in detail if you leave a comment, but email me as well, especially if you want some privacy, paul@deliberate-practice.com, and I'll get back to you as soon as you can. And I will catch you in the next article on the decision story type.